Class, and welcome to lesson 1.6b. Today we're going to take a look at one variable statistics using technology. So our main source of technology in this class is going to be the TI-83 graphing calculators. Until we get one app on our iPads or on our pieces of technology that allows us to do all of the things, we're going to use that as our main source for technology. And if you come across any apps that do all of the statistical information we're looking at doing in this course, please let me know. That'd be great so we can update our technology. All right, so for today, our expectation is to use technology to calculate measures of central tendency and spread. Okay, so remember, folks, that central tendency deals with your mean, mode, and median, whereas measures of spread talk about how far your data points are from the mean. Okay, and there's also the range in there as well. All right, so before we begin, let's make sure, for example 1, that we know what the difference between grouped data and ungrouped data. Okay, so taking a look at A, when A gives you a list of numbers and some repeat and they're not in any order, we classify that as ungrouped. Okay, and it's ungrouped because there's no organization to it. Okay, whereas example B, notice we have, it's called a frequency table, and the frequency table is grouped data. So again, grouped data has some organization to it. You will notice that X in this case, folks, is probably going to be what's called a midpoint to an interval. Okay, and F stands for the frequency. So we've taken some data and we've organized it and grouped it together. Okay, whereas again, ungrouped data is individual. And the reason we need to make sure we understand the distinction between one and the other is this is how we're going to input it into the graphing calculator in a different manner. If it's grouped, we do one different way, and if it's ungrouped, we have to do it a different method. Okay, just to give you a heads up, if we have ungrouped data, usually we're just going to use one list, which is called L1, to enter our data, whereas for a grouped data, when we get to the graphing calculator, we're going to put L1 for the midpoint or your range intervals, and L2 in your frequency. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at where we're heading today. Before we get to actually plugging in the graphing calculators, you are either going to want to print this off or write it out, and this is something you can use for your unit test, so please make sure you listen to me when I say print it off and have it available for your unit test. Okay, you can't use your notes for your unit test, but this is a sheet of paper that I'm going to allow you to use. And same for your final exam. You'll be able to use a sheet like this that tells you with the buttons. Okay, so in the class, folks, after this lesson, you are going to be able to use the graphing calculators and practice doing this. So step 1 is to reset the calculators. I have 3 or 4 steps on a sheet in my class, so I'm just going to put down here, C poster. Okay, and it'll always be up. You won't have to worry about memorizing that. Okay. Number 2 is to remember where we enter the data. So we're going to be doing a lot of data entry this unit, so you will have this memorized very shortly. So you press the Stat button and enter. Okay? Now we have to input the data into our lists. And I talked about this earlier. Make sure you understand if it's ungrouped data, you're going to put it into just L1. What does that do? That assumes frequency of 1. So if 18 repeats twice, then you write 18 in the list twice, okay? Whereas when you're dealing with group data, which is usually a frequency table, you're going to use L1 for the midpoints and L2 for the frequency. All right, so after you enter the information into the calculator, you got to tell the calculator what to do. And this is to get your stats screen. And this is where all your measures of spread, measures of central tendency lie. Okay, actually most of them. The only one that you can't see from that is mode. Okay, but the steps that you need to do to get there is you press Stat, over to Calc, and press 1. And 1 says one variable stats, and that's where you have to do, you have to tell it where the data is. So if it's just in L1, then you type in L1, but if you've got data in L1 or L2, which means you've got group data, then you've got to tell it where it belongs. Okay, and if you're wondering what the stat screen symbols represent, please take a look at page 529 and 530. 530 has the complete list of what all the symbols represent when we get to a stat screen. I will show you through this lesson how to do that. I also wanted to let you know that this is a great section in our textbook if you're having trouble with technology. There's a whole section in the back on how to help with the graphing calculator. Some of you will be pretty easygoing with the graphing calculator, and some of you might be a bit nervous. So use that section in the textbook and use me to help you to get you comfortable with the graphing calculator, because you will be using it on several unit tests and it'll be available for you on your final exam. It is the easy way, ladies and gentlemen, to do stat calculations. Okay, in real life you have an app, you have a program that does your actual calculations for you, so you need to adapt to the technology. Okay, all right. The second box you want to make sure you have this printed off is how to draw a box and whisker plot. Okay, so you enter the data into list like we've already done. You press stat, enter, and then you have to do what's called turn the plots on. So whenever you want to get any type of graph, you need to turn your plots on. So you need to tell the computer, which is your calculator, to, hey, I want to select this type. Okay, and you're going to select the fourth or fifth type on the graph. You need to make sure, again, if you have grouped data or ungrouped data, what the frequencies are. Okay, all right, and then in order to graph your window, you got to, in order to graph it, you might have to adjust your window by pressing window, and only worry about this for the x-axis information for the box and whisker. When we do scatter plots and other types of histograms on there, you might have to worry about your y-axis, but for box and whisker plot, the only scale we use is the x-axis for that. All right, so let's go through an example, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be flipping back and forth between a graphing calculator and this program, and I'll try to snapshot things in so you can see it. So 1A says to calculate all one variable stats. So one variable stats, our three central tendencies are our mean, mode, and median, and then our measures of spread are our range, IQR, standard deviation, and variance, which is attached to that. Okay. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, look at the list of data points here. Notice that this is ungrouped, okay? So when it's ungrouped, we are just going to use L1 only, which means each one has a frequency of 1, okay? And your computer will know that, or your graphing calculator computer, we still call it the same. All right, so I'm going to flip over to the graphing calculator. Okay, mine's a little different than the one you're going to see in class when you practice, but the buttons are exactly the same. So you're going to reset the calculator, so look on the sideboard where it says the buttons to press and reset them. Okay, and then the next step is to enter your data. So I'm going to press the stat button and then enter. Okay, and make sure you've got L1, L2, L3. If you do not, let me know and I will fix that. That's just a computer glitch, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to type our data into L1 just as it's shown. So I'm going to go 13, enter 18, enter 28, enter 17, enter 18, enter 16, enter 8, enter 16, enter 15, enter 29. Now before I do anything else, folks, I'm going to double check my data, because if one of these data points is off, like sometimes instead of pressing 16 I go 1.6, double check your numbers. So I'm going to go through that right now to make sure that I've got them all there and that I'm not missing any. Otherwise, all of your answers are going to be off. Okay, so take the time, it's worth it. I will always give you time on tests to double check that your data entry is correct. All right, so I've got my data entered. My next step is to retrieve that stat screen. So I press the stat button. I arrow over to calc to get your calc menu. The number 1 says one variable stats. Now I need to tell the computer where is my information in. And what list is it in, folks? It is in L1. So look near the 1 button, folks. Notice right above it, you'll see L1. On your calculator, it'll be orange. So you're going to press second and 1 to get L1. Okay. And then you press enter. Okay, notice you see a bunch of symbols. Hopefully you recognize the first one as being the mean, folks. The sum of the mean and the sum of the mean squared, that's helping you get standard deviation. You're going to see two values here that are standard deviation, and then n. I'm just going to snapshot that while I can, and then I'll snapshot the second screen, okay? So hopefully that has gone over here. Okay, and then I'm going to go back here, folks. See this down arrow with the n? That means there's other values that you can get out of here, okay? So I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to quickly snapshot that just so that we have our data all together. So that's all one screen, okay? And sorry about the bells, guys. I'm doing this on a PD day to help you get ahead of time while you're having the time off. Okay, so let's go take a look here on our stat screen. If you go to page 530 in your notes, you're going to see all these symbols and what each means. Okay, but for our purpose of our class, here's one of our answers right here. Okay, so that's the mean. So the mean, okay, should be 17.8. And I'll go to 2 decimal places here. I probably should have done that. Okay, the next one we're looking for is the median. So the median, folks, is down here. You probably have to arrow down on when you do it on your calculator. MED, which is median, and that equals 16.50. Okay. Now the mode isn't available on this until we do what's called a frequency table or a scatter plot. So we're just going to visually look for the mode. So the mode, you scan your numbers. It's a small data set, and hopefully you can find out that when I look at my mode, I see 2 18s, but I also see 2 16s. So my mode equals 16 and 18. And you guys know what it's called when you've got two modes? That's called bimodal, because there's two modes. Okay, we'll be dealing with that more when we talk about distribution types a little later on in the course, but it's just a good thing to recognize. All right, so we got our mean, mode, and median. Now we're going to start doing our range. Okay, so our range, folks, is the highest number subtract the lowest number. So look on your stat screen, you've got a min x and a max x. So range equals max x subtract min x. Okay, and according to our screen here, we got 29, subtract 8, and that equals 21. Okay, all right. Now, to do our IQR, do you guys remember our formula is Q3 subtract Q1. So let's look here. See, we've got Q1 there and Q3. So that equals 18 subtract 15, which equals 3. Okay. Our variance is related to our standard deviation, so let's do our standard deviation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there are two here. So I'm going to specify each one of these and why we have two of them. Okay, so I'm going to say that standard deviation, the one we're going to use right now, is the S at X, and if I round it to 2 decimal places, it's going to be 6.36. Okay, and this is what, so S at X represents when you have what's called a sample. Okay, so you take, instead of entire population, you have a sample of the population, whereas the sigma x, okay, which we're not going to use in this case, okay, but that's used for when you've got a population. So when a census or all the values are given, okay, and I will specify on my assessments if it's a sample or representation of the population or the entire population. Okay, so that's your stat screen, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to want to memorize those pieces of information. And just out of curiosity, if you didn't know what N means, that tells you got 10 data numbers, and the rest is used to calculate your standard deviation. All right, step 2. Let's do a box and whisker plot. Okay, so according to a box and whisker plot, I'm going to go back to my screen. You enter in the data. Well, we've got our data entered. Okay, and the next thing it says to do is we need to turn the plots on. So I'm going to press, as it says here, second and y equals. So right above second y equals, you see it says stat plot. Okay, I'm going to press enter. Currently it says my plots are off. I need to turn them on. Okay. And then I'm going to select the fourth or fifth graph. Okay. So I'm going to have to arrow. If you try to arrow down, it'll go awkwardly. So you got to go arrow to the left until you get to the, we'll try the fourth one first. If not, we can try the fifth one. So I press enter. Watch what happens as soon as I press enter. It says I've got an L1 frequency, L1 as my X list and my frequency of 1. That is what I want. Okay. And I'm going to have to, next step tells us to press window. Okay. So when we take a look at our window, this was reset from before. So my minimum value of X, we could put a 0. And our maximum value, according to our numbers, was 29. So I'm going to make sure I can see it. So I'll put down 30. Sorry, my fault. Let me clear that. Okay, so minimum 0, enter. Maximum value is going to be 30. Enter. Okay. And it doesn't matter about my Y scale. I'm just going to bring it down to 4 or 5 so you can see it. Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, when I graph this, I press graph, and there's your box and whisker plot. Okay, so it shows a couple outliers, but we're interested, remember with the IQR, we're interested in the between the first and the third data points. Okay, all right, so I'm going to quickly snapshot that, hopefully. Because you're going to do this in class to make sure that you can get that. So let's move that down, guys. Okay. All right. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was the ungrouped data. Okay. So hopefully you found that, hey, you type the data in once and it gives you all the stats information. Awesome. Okay. Now what we're going to do is take a look at grouped data. So grouped data, ladies and gentlemen, the X is usually represented by a midpoint of an interval, right? Okay, and F stands for the frequency. Okay, so a grouped data, that means we have to use two columns, L1, comma, L2. All right. So before we begin, we go to our calculator. You don't need to reset everything. However, I'm going to clear the list. So when you look on the side where it says reset, I'm just going to press second button, plus sign 4, which is clear list. Press enter. Make sure it says done. So when I go in to enter my data, I go stat, enter. It's clear. Okay, so I'm going to use the table and put L1 for my frequencies and L1 for my data, and my frequencies are going to go in L2. Just give me 1 second here. I need to pause this. Sorry about that, guys. I just had a student at the door. All right, so where were we? We were going to enter our midpoints in L1 and our frequency in L2. Okay, so going with the graph we have, I'm going to go 1.5, enter, 4.5, enter, 7.5, enter. You're going to do this in class, guys, to make sure you've got it, because you're going to use this on your assessment. Guaranteed you'll have at least one of these questions. Okay, so we're going to go 42, enter, 60, enter, 21, enter, 17, enter, and 10. Again, I'm going to take time, make sure I've got my data all correct. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. It's so simple to have a mark off. Okay. All right, so it looks like I've got my data set in L1 and L2. So now for me to get my stat screen up, ladies and gentlemen, I again press stat, over to calc. I'm doing one variable statistics. Next unit, ladies and gentlemen, when we do unit 2, you're going to be doing two variable statistics. Okay, so just keep an eye. You're going to do the same step, except instead of pressing 1, you're going to press 2 here. Okay, and now we got to tell the computer, hey, my data just isn't L1, it's in L1 and L2. So I'm going to go second 1, comma button, which is above the 7, and then we're going to go second 2. Okay, so I'm telling my calculator where things are. I press enter, and again I got my stat screen, so I'm going to just quickly snapshot it. Hopefully, if it wants to snap, there we go. Okay. All right, let me try my second snapshot here. Hopefully they're over, and then we can do the stats. Okay, so let's go back to our notes. Hopefully they're going to be there. Nice and neat for me. All right, so let me just move it over here this time. So I've got my stats screen here. Just going to switch them so that they're on top of each other. Awesome. Okay, so let's do this. Taking a look, ladies and gentlemen, my mean is 5.36. Okay. Looking at the standard deviation, we're going to use the S at X for sample. Okay. Again, I didn't give you a clear indication, but we're going to use that one unless it says for the entire population. Okay. Looking at the mode. The mode this time, folks, it's easy to do on a frequency table. You'll look at the biggest column in the frequency. So 60 has the most frequency. So what does that mean? That means data point 4.5 or midpoint 4.5. So anything between that range of data. Okay. 4.5 is the most popular because it's the most occurring. Okay. Please don't tell me 60 is the mode. That's an error people tend to make. Okay. So we've got the mode, the median, ladies and gentlemen. We'll go over to our stats screen right there, and the median equals 4.5. If you wanted to do this, ladies and gentlemen, you could add up all your frequencies and go to the middle point because they're usually in order on a frequency table. Okay, range, ladies and gentlemen, you're looking for your max X, subtract your min X. So my max X is 13.5. Subtract my min X, which is 1.5, and that gives you 12. Okay. IQR, I'll fit it up in here. So that's your Q3, subtract your Q1. Okay. And so we've got 7.5, subtract 1.5. Okay, and that equals 6. Okay. Or 6.0 if you're doing 1 decimal place or 2 decimal places. I will indicate if it's either 1 or 2. Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, I think I forgot on the last one to do my variance, but we'll do it here. So variance equals your standard deviation squared. So you just take 3.55 and square it, which equals 12.0. In most society, you don't deal much with the variance, you deal with the standard deviation. I'm going to quickly go back before I forget, and let's just do that now, okay? So we've got the standard deviation here, so variance equals standard deviation squared, okay? And so it's going to be 6.36 squared, which if you plug in your calculator is going to be 40.45. I apologize for that live video. We're okay. All right, so let's make sure we got everything on here. Do we have mean? Yes. Mode, median, range, yes. IQR, standard deviation, and variance. Good, we're good. Now to do your box and whisker plot, again, you have to go back to the calculator. Tell it to turn the plots on. So if you go second y equals, ours should still be on. This is where technology may have frozen. Let's see. Second y equals. Aha. Now I got it. Took a whole screenshot. Okay. So I just think we've got it here. Let's see if it's going to come back up. It just froze on me, guys. If not, we will just have to do this in class. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, the only thing you have to do different here is when you get to your stats screen, you have to make sure that you have frequency in L2. So when you get to that and do it in class, let me help you. So we'll do this in class. Okay, so after you've got this practice, I do want you to go over this Falcons and Ravens practice example, okay, on page 136. Get the standard deviation, mean, mode, median, what all they ask you to do. All right, so here's your homework. Use the TID3. If you have a home use one, I can get that to you. If not, on these questions, I want you to ignore these Z-scores. We will deal with that later. If you happen to have a very scientific calculator, folks, not the graphing one, but a stat calculator, if you've got a calculator that says stat mode on it, you may be able to calculate this using your graphing calculator. I am not expecting you to do this, but if you want to try doing it, here are the steps listed below, and I believe on the next page, if you need some help using just a scientific calculator, it's possible. Okay? All right, so ladies and gentlemen, back to your assigned work. Hopefully you had a good understanding of the graphing calculator. You need to develop a good comfort level with this, so please come and see me, and I'll help you make a love for your graphing calculator, which will be with you for many unit tests and your final exam. Hey, have a great day, guys, and see me if you need help.